In this section, section 3, we're going to install the engine mount and the fuel tube mount. The engine mount is critical, so we're going to want to reference the fore and aft and the lateral square drive tubes to keep this level. If you'll notice, the lower flats of the engine mount are drilled by the factory, but the upper flats will be drilled by you. But before you do that, carefully measure and make your alignments. You can use washers and bushings in here to make those adjustments, but it is important to take your time and get this correct.
Refer to the Construction Manual, Section 3, for components and prints. Note: do not cut out shims for the engine mount at this time. When engine is ready to be installed, determine which shims are needed and cut out only what is necessary. Use a drill with a sharp 5/16 inch drill bit to bore out the 4 bushings for the lower engine mount. To fit the engine mount so that it is level in relationship to the drive tubes, it will be necessary to shorten the upper bushings. Bushing material can be removed to as short as 1/16 inch away from the weld. Remember, the ends of all bushings must be 90 degrees to the hole. To begin, shorten the outboard lower bushings with a hacksaw or cutoff tool. Use a spot face drill to make the ends of the bushings square to the hole. If you don't have a spot face drill, use a file and check with a 5/16 inch bolt. Note: do not cut the inboard side of the lower bushings at this time. Next, shorten the ends of the upper bushings on the inboard side. Do not cut the outboard side of the upper bushings at this time. Level the square drive tubes of the airframe laterally and fore and aft, using shims under the skid tubes as required. Bolt the support ring to the engine mount inverted as shown. Hang a plumb from the fore and aft square tube as shown. Note: the plumb must hang from the center of the tube. You'll notice the engine mount has holes drilled in the flats of the lower arms but not in the upper arms. This is done so the correct fore and aft position of the engine mount is maintained. The upper flats will be drilled by the builder to set the engine mount in parallel with the square tubes. Position the engine mount as shown and note how the flats are in relation to the end of the bushings. If necessary, bend the flats in a vise to adjust as needed. Use two 5/16 inch bolts that have the ends turned to a point to help hold and position the engine mount. With the engine mount in position, determine the amount of bushing to be cut. That will center the engine mount ring with reference to the plumb. When satisfied with the position, cut and spot face the drill bushings. Now, determine the amount of bushing to cut on the upper outboard bushings to position the engine mount ring to be level with the fore and aft square drive tube. Cut the bushings and spot face drill or file the ends. Clamp the upper engine mount arms into position using toggle clamps. Check the engine mount to be level with the square drive tubes, plus or minus 1/4 of a degree. The distance between the bottom of the fore and aft square tube and the engine mount should be 24 inches. Note: it's acceptable to use bushings and/or washers between the airframe bushing and flats as shims to make adjustments. Once the engine mount position is set, drill a hole in the upper flats. Note: the holes in the flats do not need to be exactly centered in the flat. However, you must maintain a minimum edge distance. In other words, the hole must be at least 1.5 the bolt hole diameter from the edge. Chamfer the inside edge of the rubber ring so the engine will set completely in the ring. Cut the square tube in half to make the two tabs for the fuel tube mount. This part is located on E10, card 1T. Check the length of the fuel tube within the airframe. If necessary, trim the length to fit. The center square tube should be centered when installed. Position and mark the holes to install the tabs in position. Reference the Construction Manual Section 3, page 3. The exact position is not critical, but must be positioned so as not to interfere with the engine mount tube. When drilling holes for the tabs, drill only through the inner plate of the airframe bracket. Install the tabs with the supplied hardware. Position the fuel tube in place and locate the holes. Drill the holes in the fuel mount tube using a drill press. Drill the holes in the tabs using a right angle drill and install the bolts. This shows the fuel mount tube and engine mount installed and completes this section.